in the end.
This is what it's been building up to, ladies and gentlemen. I thought jumping into this one right away would be enough, but it really wouldn't be fair to get to here without telling the story of how we got here. And well, here we are. We had 3 successful narrative-driven games in the Tony Hawk franchise. The bar was set so high by Thug that, while each entry after was pretty good, you could start to feel cracks forming, and given Thug 2's jumping the shark nature, and the fact that Thaw tried to wheel things back, but also couldn't help itself, there was only one direction for the next game to go. Go back to the series' roots. This game tried to not just go back to the roots, but still keep some of the modern elements, but it really set out to be different from the last 3 games. Development of Tony Hawk's Project 8 started around the time developers got PS3 and 360 dev kits. 360 ones went out in late 2004 and early 2005. It was around Thug 2's release and Thaw's development. PS3 dev kits, though, didn't go out to third-party developers until early 2006, though planning for both versions started around the same time. Despite the gap in receiving kits, the dev team always had the PS3 in mind, as stated by Neversoft senior producer Clive Burden in an interview with GameSpot. I mean, Tony Hawk started on the PlayStation as a game franchise. You're not just gonna not put a game out on PlayStation. He also mentioned that many of the dev team consisted of both THPS veterans and those who were there since the Thug games. The game was fully revealed at that year's E3, and boy did it make quite an impression. Many of the things touted by Clive Burden in that interview were on display. A whole new engine, a revamped career mode, better graphics, several new mechanics, many returning features like multiplayer and the like, and it really did feel like the proper next-generation Tony Hawk game that many people were eagerly anticipating. The game also further expanded the concept of an open-world map. That was something American Wasteland tried to do, but it only felt like that on the surface. The other big thing is that a story mode would not be as narrative-driven as the last several games. That's okay, though. There's really not much else to say. Neversoft took advantage of the new hardware for the 7th generation, the game looked very promising at E3, and it released on time. Tony Hawk's Project 8, helmed by Neversoft and Activision once again, was released on the Xbox 360 and PS3 on November 7th, 2006 for North America, November 15th, 2006 for Australia, and November 17th, 2006 for Europe. The PS3 version followed on November 17th, 2006 for North America, and March 23rd, 2007 for PAL territories. There was a 6th gen version for the PS2 and Xbox that followed on the same date as the 360 versions. This version, though, was done by Shaba Games. A PSP version developed by Page 44 Studios followed on November 21st, 2006 for North America, March 8th, 2007 for Australia, and June 8th, 2007 for Europe. We'll mainly be focusing on the 7th gen versions. These are the ones Neversoft intended for you to play, to get you to go out and buy a 360 or a PS3 for. Whether they succeeded on this front, well, let's take a look. Tony Hawk's Project 8 has your standard set of modes. You've got Career Mode, which we'll get into later on, Free Skate, which will let you skate around any unlocked area of the map. You can also do 2-minute high score runs here. Pro Tricks will let you view all sorts of motion capture tricks done by the actual pros. You'll have to complete pro challenges in career mode to unlock these, then buy them at the skate shop. The create mode should just say create a skater because that's all you get here for create modes. We'll talk about it more when we get to career mode. Lastly, multiplayer returns. Trick Attack, Score Challenge, Combo Mambo, Graffiti, and Free Skate all return. Horse is also back, but only offline. Combo Challenge is new here, and you try to get the highest combo on it. The other new multiplayer mode is Walls. This mode is kind of like the equivalent of the Light Cycle game from Tron, but with skateboarding. You keep your combo going to make the wall behind you longer, then box your opponent in to eliminate them. With the exception of Horse, all the modes are playable both offline and online, though only the Xbox 360 version is online. You can even do team-based competitions, which is cool. The main meat and potatoes of it all is career mode. When you start career mode, you'll have to get into the story much like the last 3 games. Though it does the American Wasteland method of making a character from several pre-built templates. Though here it's a little bit different. You can pick a specific style that you want to go for from what you see. And then within that style, there are 3 different templates that you can choose from and then customize further. It's a bit more varied than Thaw, but I don't know. Also, like Thaw, you can't use your career mode in free skate / multiplayer modes. I understand why it was like this in the last game, given the narrative-driven feel, and the direction it takes in certain spots. But here, that's not really the case. So why limit us like this when it's not necessary? I mean, there is a story, but it's the bare minimum. Nothing like the last few games. Anyways, after you select your skater, you can customize their look. You do have some default looks in the templates, like I said earlier, and you do have options for clothing and the like, and custom logos and colors and still. But things like tattoos and other stuff like that aren't really available. This does make it feel like a step back since you can't, well, go beyond in certain instances like this when you could in the previous games. It almost feels like we're going back to the original CAS modes. But hey, back to the roots, so yeah? After you've set your skater up, you can play the tutorial. The pros will help you relearn, or learn for the first time if this is your first Tony Hawk game, the basics. And they will teach you the new mechanics. We'll get into those later on. Once you complete the tutorial or decide it's time to just start, you can start the game. Tony Hawk and company find themselves in Beaver Valley. Presumably, if you believe Ice Bear's Forever's theory about all the Tony Hawk games being connected, it's somewhere in Tampa. Hey, how do you explain Eric Sparrow appearing on the leaderboards? He doesn't appear in-game, but you do hear his voice actor, Ben Diskin, pretty early on. Not to mention, with the Tampa Am being a pretty big event in the universe, and Tony Hawk looking for the best of the best, this is a solid place to find talent. He's trying to put together a new skate team, and he wants the best 8 he can find. This group will be known as Project 8, hence the name of the game. Also, the 8th from Neversoft in this series. Your ultimate goal here is to find and complete different types of challenges. Each area you visit will have a few unique goals, but for the most part, you'll find similar sets of goals. There are spot challenges. These are each marked with 3 lines. First for the AM, second for Pro, and third for Sick. There are challenges for grinds, manuals, nada spins, wall rides, wall plants, acid drops, stalls, heights for maximum air, and distances for big jumps. There are also various photo opportunities. At a specific spot, the game will ask you to perform a specific trick over said spot. You have AM, Pro, and Sick difficulties. There are also demos to do. Keep successfully landing big combos in front of the crowd to keep them stoked. You have 1 minute to do so, and you want to keep them all stoked by the end for the Sick rating. There are also turf wars. These goals involve not just hitting a specific line within the time limit, but also getting a specific score by the time you reach the goal. Again, 3 difficulties, same as it ever was. There's also, in what I assume is an attempt to keep Classic mode in this version in some way, a Classic goals section. This pretty much plays out like Classic mode / the older Tony Hawk Pro Skater games 1 through 3. You have 2 minutes to get as many goals done as possible. 5 gets an AM rating, 8 gets a Pro, and if you get all done in one run, Sick. There are also film goals. You'll follow the cameraman and perform specific tricks listed. You'll have about a minute and a half to get as many done. They start out simple, but as you get to the higher rank, they get more difficult. Competitions also return in some of the levels, but they play out a bit different from the original games. In the original games, you had 3 heats per skater that lasted 1 minute. Best 2 heats won, and try to avoid bailing. Here, there are 3 threshold scores, 1 for each difficulty. Depending on the score you hit, that will determine the bracket you are placed in. You then have to get the minimum point amount and a specific rating from the judge, so do mind your performance. The thing is though, is it really a competition when you aren't competing against others unlike the older games? It's more like, you got into this bracket, now try to get this high score. The judge thing just feels a bit tacked on, and Yeah. There are also pro challenges. Some of them feature the standard skating stuff, but others feature newer mechanics such as the physics system and nail the trick. More on those last two soon. The get there, as in over there, goals have you hit a set of markers in a specific amount of time. If you hit them all in time with a high score, pro. Do it all in a combo, sick. There are a couple race goals, some Olympiskate goals seen in the previous entries, and that pretty much covers every major goal type, sans the one that use the new mechanics. Now let's get into the actual gameplay. The gameplay itself isn't actually that far off from American Wasteland. You'll follow the compass to find an objective and then complete it. Unlike American Wasteland, which has you complete everything in a mostly linear way, Project 8 actually does open-end things up just a little bit more. Your stats won't be all beefed up at the start of the game, though you'll need to build them up. You'll do this by doing things like doing manuals to increase your manual stat and things like that. Any linear fashion is mostly with you doing things that open up the areas and big events, but you'll probably come back later to either actually get the goal done or go for a higher rating. You need higher ratings to increase your rank. The sicker ratings, well, the higher the rank. When you start off, you'll be ranked 200. You'll need to climb to rank 8 to get into Project 8. You need to get rank 1 in order to, well, fully beat the game. But that's easier said than done. In fact, that's kind of the whole motto of this game in a nutshell, but I'll get more into that later on. You'll pretty much do the standard set of stuff seen in past Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, but there have been some new mechanics to spice things up. The first big new mechanic is Nail the Trick. When you get into the skate park, you'll find the first pro challenge from Rodney Mullen. This is where you learn about this. At any point in the air, you can click in both analog sticks and trigger this mode. You can then push and hold the analog sticks in specific directions to twist the board in, well, many directions. Well, you're really controlling the feet that can determine the direction, but you get the idea. When you're ready to land, make sure the grip tape is facing up before you release the sticks. Otherwise, you'll bail. There are actually quite a bit of goals in the game that require you to use this mechanic. It works and it's an interesting idea, but I do feel like it's only really used for the goals that need it and for enhancing tricks. Plus, the camera moves when you spin around with this on, so it can be hard to determine the position to get the board back into place, assuming you're not just, well, straight on. The other big thing is the physics system. You thought we were out of the woodwork with jackass-like stuff? You ain't seen nothing yet. At any point upon bailing, your skater can ragdoll around. Using Y or triangle, you can also bounce them around. The more gnarly the bail, the higher the hospital bill. Sounds familiar? Well, then you've probably played the insurance fraud in the Saints Row series, and this is kind of like that in a nutshell. In fact, this game actually came out months after the original Saints Row did, but then again, Saints Row was in development much longer than Project 8, so I don't know. Coincidence? Yeah, let's just chuck it up with that. Like Nail the Trick, there are many goals that require the use of the bail system. This is not for the better. The last big change to the game is the currency. Instead of money, you earn stokens. You earn these by landing combos in front of pedestrians who will give you them. If you knock over a pedestrian, you can take their stokens. If you do, though, they will chase you to knock you down and, well, get them back. You'll have to get far away enough. You can use these tokens to buy skate decks, special tricks, and pro tricks. For some weird reason, at least in the 360 version, certain decks won't stay after you buy them, even if you save a few times. In particular, Zooyark Reflection / Classic Tag and Thug 2 decks would not stay no matter how many times I bought them. I don't know why this glitch is here, but no, this should not be the case. Also, as a sort of makeup for not having Create a Park, there are some objectives that have you place objects in a specific way that you need in order to hit a line, like Paul Rodriguez's challenge. Okay, despite some flaws so far, it seems like there's still a lot of fun to be had with this game, right? In doses, yes. On the whole, well, you see, it's, rather complicated. Not exactly. Now, why do I say that? Well, because quite frankly, I can say without any ounce of hyperbole or irony, Tony Hawk's Project 8 is the hardest Neversoft Tony Hawk game I've ever played. And keep in mind, I've played pretty much almost all of them except for Proving Ground as of writing this and recording. Before I played this, I considered Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 to be the hardest, mainly due to the advanced nature of the later goals in the game and the pro challenges. Here, though, where do I even begin? My reasons for why I said what I said about the game's difficulty comes from a mix of both gameplay design and some technical issues. You notice a lot of the game's thresholds for the specific ratings. They are a bit higher than what was seen in the previous games, especially for competitions and the like. And there's only like 4 competitions in the game in total. Not to mention, with the more open-ended area nature of the game, you may find yourself doing a hard goal right after an easy goal, and vice versa. I know you can always go back for a sick rating when getting better stats, but sadly, this is one of the downsides of open-ended nature of this game. Okay, so some of it is skill-related. I bet you're asking, is there any other thing that makes this game as hard as you say? Yeah, the ideas of some of these goals. There are certain stipulations in these goals that you have to keep in mind if you want the sick rating. For example, the get there over there goals. If you want to get the 6 score, you need to hit the combo before you start the line, or start the combo before you hit the start line. Otherwise, have fun with the pro score. This isn't the only one goal type in this game that is too much sometimes. Many of the physics-based goals will especially push your limits. Any goal that requires you to rack up a hospital bill especially. You can have the most gnarliest bail, and you won't even get half of what you're required to for even a pro score, let alone a 6 score. There's no rhyme or reason for why the hospital bills go the way they go. Don't try to understand it, there is no explanation. There's also no rhyme or reason as to why the skater goes where the skaters go upon bailing, at least until you get to Bam's Pro Challenge, but even then, I still had trouble grasping it. This makes this enigma of a system more frustrating since there are very specific goal requirements for the ratings, but in spite of this, some of these goals can actually be exploited. In particular, both of the bowling goals. The one on Main Street, if you jump off the pizza ramp on the roof of the pizza place, then get off your board, as you land, the ground will rattle since you've jumped and landed from a great height. This will actually knock most, if not all, of the pins down, and you can just focus on the hospital bill. The one in the slums, if you follow the path right, you can actually knock down the pins, go back to the start point, and focus on the hospital bill. Even the second part of Bam Margera's Pro Challenge can be exploited. The second part has you bailing and trying to land in the dumpster. It's actually possible to not land in the dumpster after you bail, but the game won't reset you. You can then actually just hop into the dumpster, and it will count the challenge as complete. This actually happened to me. No joke. Oh, and the physics themselves. Good grief, they are way too over the top. This was supposed to be more grounded compared to the past 2 entries, yet here we have a system that looks like it would fit right in Thug 2. Okay, so during Bam's challenge, they do give you some guidance to bailing and controlling the bail, but how you want to go doesn't always coincide with how it goes. You can do everything by the book, and the results won't match, thus a need to exploit. There are actually plenty of videos on YouTube with people screwing around with the physics in this game. It's that crazy. You might say I'm not playing the game the way Neversoft intended by doing this, but the physics system feels like it doesn't even play by its own rules at times. So why should I play fair if the game isn't going to? You gotta do what you gotta do. Wink wink. Also, with regards to classic goals, for one sick rating, you get all goals done in one 2-minute run. For veterans of the franchise, you could probably get through this easier than a new player. Even then, as you move on, the levels get bigger, and the goals get more complex, like, especially when you're trying to do them all in one go. By themselves, some of them aren't so bad. Well, most of them really aren't. But when you're trying to do them all in 2 minutes, yeah, it gets to a point where you need to be very accurate with completing your goals and which order you do them in. Also, I swear the perspective makes it look like you're phasing through letters. Does it help that you don't have parkour? Many mechanics like that and graffiti and the like were removed to simplify the game to be more like the older ones. But those damn turf wars, man. Only the real combo masters can get these on sick. The sick ratings have an especially stupidly high point rate. That assumes one of the technical issues doesn't screw you over, and the plain turf war in this skate park was so damn frustrating that, well, this is how I felt by the end.
Fuck.
This was insane! That was pure luck! I was not in control of that situation at all!
Almost 1,000 fucking tries. Tell me you wouldn't be feeling that by the end. So, on top of gameplay design that is the skateboard equivalent to the Day of Reckoning games on GameCube, what else could make this even harder? How about a couple technical problems? One minor and one major. The minor, phasing through solid objects. At certain points in the game, I've had my skater go through certain objects. The biggest one was on the final challenge. The sidewalk on Main Street, like depending on which side you hit, but I was going to the left side. My skater at one point just went straight through the ground for no reason whatsoever. That wasn't the only time that happened, but that was the real noteworthy one. So okay, that's happened before, but is there anything that can really screw you up? How about an unstable frame rate at times? Okay, let's back up a moment. One thing that makes Project 8 more open world compared to American Wasteland is that there are no tunnels that act as loading screens to link the areas. Once you open up the whole map, you can start a combo at one end of the map and end it on the other side of where you want to go. Heck, that's pretty much the final challenge in a nutshell. Unfortunately, this comes with a cost. Many of the areas tend to overlap in the world, and you may need to frequent some of them for certain goals, like going back to them. Even disregarding that, there are times where the frame rate does tend to struggle quite a bit thanks to the graphical enhancements. I make a big deal of the frame rate because, one, every Neversoft Tony Hawk game from 3 up to American Wasteland ran with a consistent 60 frames per second. And even though the first 2 games only had a 30 frames, it was still consistent. Sans that one problem in the Xbox version of Thug 2, but that's beside the point. 2. If the frame rate goes to hell, that can screw up a run. You almost have it, and then the frame rate decides to die. This forces you to do it over again, which not only makes you frustrated, but that can also make subsequent runs a pain thanks to said frustration. Even selecting decks in the skate shop menu, the frame rate can take a hit there. You might not notice any major frame rate issues in this footage. That's because I'm playing an RPCS3 with a 60 frames per second patch. On real hardware, though, you only get 30 frames per second, and you're going to be in for a rough time, my friends. At least the controls are still on point. With the 360 also more accurate to the PlayStation line of controllers by now having 2 bumpers instead of black and white buttons, there is true parity between the 2 versions of the game regarding controls. The only difference is, do you want a worser D-pad? Because that's what the 360 controller brings. Unless you use a Chronos Max and use an Xbox Series controller on your 360. Regardless, both versions control well. Inputs are responsive as they should be when the frame rate is fine. Flips have been reworked though. Not much else has changed though aside from this. But rather than holding the grab button and pushing up or down, you hold LT or L2 depending on the controller you're using, and then push up or down to do front or back flips respectively. Sadly, barrel rolls are omitted because of this. But beyond that, many of the usual mechanics from the previous games are back, and they all work as they should. The tutorial especially helps line everything out for new players. Also, God bless focus. If you're wondering why I've used it so much, not just here, but in Thug 2 and American Wasteland, refer back to the part where I talk about the game's problems and difficulty. Seriously, it will save your ass more often than not in this game. But yeah, the controls are pretty much near perfect, and I really wish I could say more without sounding like a broken record, you know. Though I will say the PS3 version does support 6-axis tilting function for balancing manuals and grinds and stuff, but I wouldn't bother with this personally, especially since I'm emulating the game, you know, let alone using a controller with none of that stuff. The graphics for this game are actually really good. The game is running on an all-new engine, and boy did they ever get the most out of it. You start to notice from the very intro, mainly in the animations in general, there are a good amount of variety in them from skater to skater. This is because each character has a unique motion captured style. This not only prevents reused animations, but it makes each skater stand out from one another since they won't all feel the same, unlike the previous games. This even extends to unlockable characters, which include real people and ones created for this game. Not to mention, specific ones, 20 at once, for animations can blend together for upper and lower body animations. It all looks insanely smooth. Animations for things like tricks, balancing, and everything in between also benefit from this. The animations look just like you would expect in real life. It makes the game look less recycled than its predecessors. The models for the pros from head to toe also look much better than before. The heads alone use 100,000 polygons. Just imagine how many are used in the rest of the body. This allows the models to especially look detailed. Facial animations are also better as a result, and the models really did show that this was the next upgrade in the Tony Hawk franchise. Custom skaters and NPCs do also take advantage of some of these upgrades, and they look fine for the most part, but oh man, those pro skater models are awesome. Objects in the environment also benefit from the new engine. Objects like buildings and the like look really smooth, probably thanks to a bunch of polygons. Not to mention there's a ton of interactivity in them thanks to the design of each of them. Like past games, each stage has a well-placed arrangement of ramps, rails, pipes, and all sorts of other normal skate objects to odd-end ones. This opens up the possibility for many lines, and you'll especially need to use them here if you want to rack up big points. There's a decent amount of variety in the levels you visit as well. Each level also has enough distinct objects to make them stand out, and the linking of them is well done, even if they are so different. It makes the town realistic in some ways. They're also bigger compared to the previous games. The last set of major benefits include advanced shaders and lighting system for more realistic lighting, depth of field, and a crap ton of bloom in some instances. I think Neversoft overdosed on her. Never mind. All wrapped up at either 1080i for the 360 up to that, or 720p for the PS3. Both 30 frames per second. Not a smooth one, might I add. Leads to some animations looking twitchy in certain instances. I think Neversoft was so focused on making the game looking so good that they forgot to optimize it in parts. Playing in emulation does mitigate this, and you can even go to 1080p 60 frames per second in RPCS3. Very well too, might I add. The sound is pretty on point. Sound effects have taken a more subtle approach, like the special trick sound effect. It's not as pronounced as the previous one. This applies to other sound effects, but it does help enhance the game's more grounded nature as a result. Still, grinds, wall rides, sounds of the board skating on the ground, which can change depending on the terrain, environment sounds, bale sounds, and everything in between all sound good. The music here is pretty good. We have punk, rock, and hip-hop on display like the past games. Many feature player from past Tony Hawk games like Primus and Bad Religion return. Other bands include Zeke, who had one of their songs featured in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, might I add. Also, Kasabian, with their theme Club Foot being used in the intro, and it was also seen in Juiced. The Ramones, The Cure, Gym Class Heroes, Gnarls Barkley, and The Dead Milkman, because someone at Neversoft thought you can't have punk on a soundtrack and not have Punk Rock Girl, even if it took 7 years between the release of the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game and this game's release. Still, I like the mix of songs here. I have a few particular favorites, and while it might not be as hard-hitting as the soundtracks from 1 through 3 for THPS, or even the last few entries, it's still an enjoyable list that gets the job done. The voice acting here is pretty good. The pros and real-life people sound pretty much as you would expect. Many of the in-game characters are voiced by veteran voice actors. I already mentioned Ben Diskin, but there's quite a few other ones that might surprise you. The dad from Shag Dad's Balls, Drew Massey, voiced Zebao and T-Sang from Jade Empire. And I kid you not, Sid the Science Kid himself. Andy McAfee, who voiced one of the realtors, voiced Phoebe in Hey Arnold. The Colonel is voiced by Daryl Curlio, the original English voice for Kazuma Kiryu. The one and only, might I add. One of the news reporters is voiced by Jim Ward, the original Jack Krauser voice in the original Resident Evil 4. The mascot is voiced by Keith Ferguson, Blue from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. The custom female skaters are voiced by Masa Moyo, Sarah from Team America, and the original English VA for Lisa from Dead or Alive. The nuclear mom is voiced by Nan McNarma, apologies for butchering, aka Anya Stroud from Gears of War's voice actress. The twins in the school classical are voiced by Nika Futterman, Asajj Ventress from Clone Wars. The other realtor is voiced by Rusty Schwimmer. Yes, the same one from the opening scene of Twister. Veteran anime VA and typical wise old man voice the late William Frederick Knight, voice the mayor, and yeah, it's quite the cast, and they all do good. For unlockable content, you'll get videos as you go through the various challenges, and you'll also unlock bonus characters. The Beaver, the Bum, the Filmer, Jason Lee, the Photographer, the Real Estate Agent, the Security Guard, a Zombie, and even Travis Barker from Blink-182 because reasons, amongst many others, and it will take you quite a bit since there's a lot to unpack. Tony Hawk's Project A, while it did do enough to stand out from the past few games by looking good, sounding good, going back to basics, controlled well, and it really did bring the Tony Hawk franchise to the 7th gen of consoles properly, the game is still barred by an inconsistent frame rate, some glitches, some game design regarding goals that either don't blend together well, too many luck-based goals regarding the physics, which already feel over the top even though it's supposed to be more grounded, and ridiculously higher thresholds for score goals and the like, which all contribute to ultimately making the game way harder than expected. I think Neversoft took all the complaints about the past couple games, especially being easier to heart, but they overcompensated when they made the game as difficult as it is. There's no difficulty selection here either, unlike the last few games, so you're at Neversoft's mercy for all of it. That said, if you play in an emulation, you'll have a better experience with better resolution and frame rate. But if you're going to do this, remember, RPCS3 until Xenia can run this in a more stable way. Fun fact, the 360 version originally ran at 60 FPS before Neversoft patched it out. If you want to try it, don't update the game on real hardware. If you want to get the physical to rip or play on real hardware for some reason, the game is around $10 complete in box, and I think that's a fair price. Though the PS3 version is slightly worse on real hardware. Worse loading times, worse frame rate, more prone to crashing and screen tearing, yeah. Emulation really helped me realize a PC port of this version would have been beneficial. Hell, Xbox backwards compatibility would have benefited this. Oh well. I give Tony Hawk's Project 8 a 3 out of 5 on real hardware, go cry me a river, and in emulation a 3.5 out of 5. Now that that's done, I need a break from some skateboarding games. I don't know what we're going to do next, but we're going to do something, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click the big red button below to subscribe. Check out the other links in the description for more cool stuff, and check out the playlist on screen for more content. See you in the next video.